What's up, everybody? I'm Jason, and welcome to the vlog, back to the vlog for Friday, September the 3rd, 2021. So, if I'm a little disjointed here, this is the third time I've recorded this, the second time I've recorded this, I don't remember now. And the short of it is the last version recording I did, uh, I don't know what the heck happened. The file wasn't obviously corrupt, but I couldn't get it to open or import into DaVinci Resolve. It was just an H.264 file, and I could play it in like VLC or whatever, but I couldn't get it to import in Resolve. Resolve just saw it as an audio file with no video track. And, well, I kind of wanted to go through this stuff sort of anyway, and so I'm going to take this as an excuse to try and do this faster and more efficiently. So I got two things I want to talk about briefly. One of the things is the evolution of the vlog, what I'm doing, and why things may look funny in some future videos potentially. And the other thing I want to talk about is the new Canon communication shoe and how I feel that this is the beginning of a step in the right direction for the camera industry, but probably not as much of a step as I'd really like to see. So to start off, what's up with the vlog? So I've said this before, this is sort of an experimental platform for me. It's less about trying to be perfect and precise and more about trying to, well, but I've got a lot of sort of things for it's got a lot of functions for me. So one is it's just straight up practice. Uh, it's an extemporaneous type thing that's not necessarily focused on something technical, which is where I find I get into the most trouble. When I start talking about artistic stuff, I really start having, I feel like I really start struggling. Second of all, it's practice, just straight up practice. I don't know if I'm the only person like this, but I find talking to a camera is incredibly difficult. Well, it's not incredibly difficult, the talking to a camera part. It's I just don't have the kinds of feedback or whatever that I have when I'm talking to an actual person. So I find when I'm recording videos, I tend to have vocalized pauses, so saying or something like that, way more frequently than I do when I actually am talking to somebody in person, even if what I'm talking about is literally the same conversation I had explaining something to somebody in person. Put it in front of a camera, and I just can't handle something. I don't know. It's different. So this is obviously practice for me. What I've discovered is the more I do this, the more practice I have, the better I am at controlling those or breaking those bad habits. Third, this is a practice thing for just recording, editing, like etc. Now that's less of an issue right now because I'm putting out 3 videos a week, but it's still something that I'm kind of trying to do. And of course, another big function of this for me is having something to dial back sort of my biases. So everybody's subject to some biases. Two of the big ones are projection bias and confirmation bias. And so projection bias is basically that you think everybody thinks like you because that's how you think. And so, that just, it's a natural tendency of our brains to assume that everybody has the same values, or what's important to everybody else is the same thing as what's important to us. The other one, projection bias, or that's projection bias. The other one is confirmation bias, which is everybody has a tendency to want to hear things that they want to hear. So if I use a camera a certain way, I'm going to look for people who reinforce that thought process. Well, sometimes I could be off in left field. Sometimes I could have an idea that, when I talk to somebody about it, they, for legitimate reasons, not just because they can't imagine why anybody would want that, but for legitimate reasons say, I don't think that's a good idea, or why would you want to do that? That doesn't seem like it would be that smart. So obviously here I'm talking, but there's a comment section below and you're free to write comments and you're free to tell me, hey, that's something that sounds really good, or I don't think that would be good for us as photographers at all, or whatever. And that helps to, um, I don't want to say reel me in, rein me in, whatever, but it helps to allow me to think about or understand where I sort of, where my use cases and whatnot sort of fit into the broader picture of photography and videography. Because hey, I'm not the only person doing this, and I may have found something that works really well for me and share it, and it might work really well for someone else, but there might not work well at all for somebody, a third person, and they may have something that works even better than what I have. So, you know, there is that. So what I'm changing. So the evolution of the vlog has been, it was a in-camera recording that I moved to being a live stream so I wouldn't have to edit it, because the editing was starting to become a chore and I didn't want to do that, which I then moved to being a edited recording because I found that I was rambling way too much just on a live stream, and I didn't think it was a valuable use of my time or your time or anybody else's time to just ramble like that. What I've realized in the last couple of days is the way I've been shooting these is sit down, shoot the intro, shoot the whole thing in one shot as if it was a live stream, and then go through and edit it. So the change that's going to be coming potentially in the near future is that I'm going to be, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that I may suddenly change shirts or something in the middle of a video, a vlog. So what I've kind of decided I want to try and do is, when I have a thought that I think would be relevant to the vlog, shoot that, record it, get it down, get it in paper, or not in paper, but get it on disc, and build those up into something that I can tack on to either, if it's a small news week, there isn't an awful lot to talk about, then I could just use one or two of these. If it's a, big news week, I'm not sitting on an idea that isn't coming to fruition, that's just churning along in my head, and I'm having a hard time focusing maybe on other stuff. Because there is value, I think, in not, I don't want to say dwelling, but not dwelling on an idea or thought if you can execute on it. So by executing on it, it allows you to get it out of your head and move on to more things, better things potentially. So what's going to be happening is, some of these videos are going to be recorded straight through. Some of these videos are going to be a recorded intro, and then it's going to cut to me talking about something else. And as I said, I might not be sitting here. I might be wearing different clothes. I might have different backgrounds. In 6 months, I might be cutting in something that I recorded, today or something like that, or 6 months earlier. So it's potentially going to get a little bit jumpier, or whatever, but I'm going to see how this goes, trying to get these crazy ideas out of my head instead of having to sit and dwell on them, and maybe get them into your head. And maybe some of these ideas might gain some traction, and we might actually get camera companies to do something because of a crazy idea that some random photographer had. So that's what's going on with the vlog. The second thing I wanted to talk about today is the new communication shoe that Canon is doing. So we know for certain it's going to be in the R3, and it's been announced it's in the XF605 professional camcorder. Where it goes from there is not entirely obvious. So there's a lot that hasn't been told, cleared up on what this does publicly. Canon Rumors has been reporting that maybe in the R5C. Maybe a lot depends on when we see or what we see, if we see an R5C. Canon Rumors was also speculating that it may be a paid upgrade to the R5. It's not going to be a $100 upgrade, I can tell you that. It's not going to be like Canon Log was for the 5D Mark IV. We're talking, they're going to have to put in, well, it's not going to just be, it's going to be a new hot shoe, but it's also going to be new boards, new electronics, new wiring. I mean, it's not going to be just as simple as switch the hot shoe out, or in the case of the R5D Mark IV and Canon Log, flash it with a firmware or unlock something. Um, Additionally, we don't have a huge understanding of what this does. So we do know that it can at least handle some level of audio transfer. So TIAC has announced that they're developing a recorder that slots into the hot shoe on the R3 and the 605, XF605. They'll also have a version that works with Fuji's hot shoe, and then they're apparently going to have a version that doesn't have the intelligent connectivity, that you will use a audio cable that will work for Nikon, Sony, or anybody else, just patching it in like we do now. So we know that the audio is going to be there. What we don't entirely know yet is what else is happening. So it's not clear to me if we're talking about digital audio or analog audio. Digital audio, in my opinion, would be great because you can have potentially a really good 32-bit dual ADC recorder, like something from Zoom, that's hooked in directly to putting those 32-bit PCM tracks right into your video in camera, as opposed to, you know, having to deal with sync and all that after the fact. There's no idea. I'm not sure at all how many channels this is going to handle. Is it just going to be stereo / 2 channels? Is it going to be able to handle multiple channels, arbitrary number of channels, you know, whatever? It's not entirely clear if it's going to have secondary control options, so time code sync or something like that, where you could have a, you know, an audio recorder that also is getting a real-time time code signal from a central source that syncs in and sets the time code for the camera, you know, all of that kind of stuff. It's not at all clear, you know, again, Canon hasn't fully announced this. There's no developer kit or anything like that. There's no, uh, it's not clear whether this is going to be one of these like really proprietary Canon just works with a couple of people, or if it's going to be, you know, way more open. If it's going to be something that, you know, so Canon invests in, and this becomes sort of the standard hot shoe on their hybrid mirrorless and video cameras. You know, and if that's the case, do they then decide to invest in the market as a whole and start talking or working with other manufacturers to implement devices? Because personally, I've used Tascam recorders in the past. I have nothing bad to say about them. But right now, as things stand, I really prefer Zoom and the dual ADC 32-bit recording. So, that all of this comes down to just being a safety net for me. So I'm a lone wolf shooter. I have to do my audio, I have to do the video, I have to do everything myself. And the 32-bit capabilities, specifically in the Zoom, specifically because of having dual ADCs and the massive dynamic range that allows those recorders to cover, you know, versus something like the sound devices Mix Pre 2s that really only have 24-bit ADCs in them, even though they're generating a 32-bit file. So the whether or not this opens up to, you know, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to potentially going, you know, buying something from Tascam. I'm not saying it, or TIAC. I'm not saying that I don't like them or don't want them, but I'd really like to see a Zoom product, you know, an F6 equivalent or something like that. Likewise, this would be a great thing for Rode. The wireless Go receiver is already designed. The little clippy thing is designed to fit in the hot shoe on a camera, and that very easily could potentially have the digital auto or digital contacts in it in such a way that you could just slot that little thing in. And especially like with the second gen or the Rode Wireless Go 2 that has two transmitters to one receiver, that would be really a potentially useful tool to have for, you know, something right on camera. It's a little tiny package that could be kept in the hot shoe when you're out shooting, you know, doing video, doing whatever. And it's not something that's going to be so bulky, so big, and so in the way that it would be a readily obvious, readily big issue, and it could then interface through this new communication shoe. Now, I mean, okay, people are going to say, yeah, but the wire's fine. Yeah, the wire is okay. I'm not going to like pretend that it doesn't work, because it has worked for a long time. But this would make it cleaner and easier. And again, if the camera can power the device, or the device can sense the power of state of the camera, you also get into a situation where, for example, with a wireless Go hooked up this way, or a wireless Go like wireless system hooked up this way, you don't have to worry about charging the receivers. The camera either handles that or just provides power straight up. You don't have to worry about turning it on and off, running out of battery life because you forgot to turn it off. When you turn the camera off, the receiver can turn off. So there's sort of a lot of, I think, benefits to this kind of thing. Now, of course, the big thing to me is if it's not open, which I think unfortunately is going to be the situation, because that's what camera companies seem to do. So Fuji has a shoe, interface shoe. Now Canon has an interface shoe. They're obviously not the same thing. Canon obviously isn't talking to Fuji. There's no standards or standard alliance or whatever platform for all of this. And that's, I think, the frustrating part, because I don't like analog. I've had too many problems with analog things, that both my wireless Go and my F6 have issues in analog stages somewhere. So the wireless Goes, if you have the receiver being charged by the wrong kind of USB charger, the noise that the USB power supply, or that comes in through the USB power, will create interference noise in the audio signal that wouldn't be there if it was a purely digital connection. Because, well, one, it would digital connections tend to be designed to reject noise, and that's not the case for the vast majority of non-XLR essentially audio standards. They're not designed to reject noise. They're not balanced. They don't do anything fancy to do that. And two, you can have things like checksums and whatnot to ensure that it's not a problem. You also don't have the dependence on low voltage. Yes, digital signals tend to be transmitted by low voltages, but it's a low voltage that's either 0 or say 3.3 volts or 5 volts or even 1.8 volts. It's not, well, the signal has to be millivolts here because it's a really quiet thing, and then it's maybe a volt because it's a really loud thing. And of course, mic level outputs are extremely low, low or cool, whatever you want to call it, the opposite of hot. They're not high amplitude. They're very small voltages. The other one, of course, is the Zoom F6. Again, designed kind of poorly. It has an analog line out. The analog line out provides up to has 96 decibels, so 16 bits of dynamic range. But and the F6 has a built-in attenuator for that. However, instead of attenuating the signal by having an actual physical, like, resistor-based attenuator that's after the ADC, they did the easy thing. They just attenuate the values going into the ADC, and the ADC puts out a quieter signal. But of course, what that means is the noise floor for the ADC stays the same. You just have lower signal coming out, and so you have less dynamic range. Now, both of these cases are issues of, well, the Rode maybe not so much an issue of design, but there probably is some design factors there. The F6 is clearly a design issue. It's not a manufacturing problem. It's not a broken components problem or something like that. It's straight up, they decided that the best way to implement the attenuator, the pad, was to do it digitally before the signal was converted to analog. probably with the assumption that, well, hey, if you have, about a 40 decibel dynamic range, that's fine. You can feed that into a camera. It's not a big deal. Uh, it's scratch audio. It doesn't have to be perfect, so they didn't really worry about making it perfect. Of course, I know the argument against this is going to come down to, yeah, but analog is better. I don't know why everybody thinks analog is better, and especially in this context, as I said, or context, as I said, analog is where every one of the problems that I have comes up. If it was a digital connection from the road to the recorder, there almost certainly wouldn't be noise issues. If it was a digital connection out of the F6 back to the cameras for scratch audio, again, your attenuation isn't happening. Well, first of all, you wouldn't need to attenuate the signal at all because it's a digital file. So it's going to be some agreed standard, say 5 volts or something like that. And, that's going to work. Of course, I kind of hinted on the problem there. There's got to be an agreed standard. That's the problem that I see with this Canon shoe, is it's not likely to be an industry standard. And the next thing you're going to see probably is Sony coming out with their own communication shoe, and it's not going to be compatible with Canons. It's not going to be compatible with Fujis. And we're going to continue to perpetuate this situation of little fiefdoms, and especially little fiefdoms that aren't, I don't think they're beneficial to the consumer. They're certainly not, but they're little fiefdoms that aren't even sort of really relevant places to win a battle. Canon isn't making, at least it's not obvious that they're trying to make any kind of profit or sales or whatever. I mean, maybe they're going to announce a bunch of stuff, but they're not, this isn't like a RF lenses to Canon or something like that. It's an interface for third-party audio stuff to hook up to the camera that they aren't making, because unless they start making third-party, like, at least I haven't seen any rumors suggesting that Canon's going to start doing audio recorder, audio devices or something like that hooks into the camera through this comm shoe, that this is going to be a major selling point. And I don't see it as a major selling point for sort of Canon side of things. It just straight up, if there isn't sort of a broad, if the only thing that you can get that goes in the shoe is this TAC recorder, it's not a major selling point to anybody. It only becomes a major selling point when I can get devices that from a variety of manufacturers that, either that meet my needs one way or another. So I think, that my fear is that this is going to become one of those things. It's just going to be another little niche thing that isn't going to take off because the companies involved don't want to, specifically Canon or Fuji or Sony or whatever. They're not interested in broader adaptation of the technology or the interface. So I kind of would leave it at that, but I really want to talk briefly about sort of my utopian dream for this kind of stuff, which is we start tying this stuff together, networking it one way or another. I don't, whether it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and Bluetooth or USB or Ethernet or some new kind of high bandwidth like version of HDMI that can do audio, that can, well, I mean, HDMI can do this, but it's like bidirectionally able to handle audio video control signals, etc. But at least as a lone wolf, this is where I kind of really would like to see things go. So moving to digital, as I see, has some advantages in that we packetize things and we can checksum it, which means we know if the data got corrupted, which means we can either do something like ask the sender to retransmit. I mean, this is how the internet works for the vast majority of traffic that, well, there's two kinds of traffic on the internet, TCP and UDP, but For the reliable traffic, TCP, there's a checksum on the packet, and if the packet arrives and doesn't match the checksum, then your computer says back to the other computer, hey, that packet was corrupt, send it again. So we could start doing that, so that, I mean, besides having built-in sort of inherent tolerance of noise in a way that's not there in an analog system, so differential signaling is going to be, is pretty standard for high-speed uh, uh, digital buses. So you have that. On top of that, you have basically just two logic levels. So even if the voltages say, just say a 1 is 1 volt and a 0 is 0 volts, that's really defined. If you get a quarter of a volt, that's going to be a 0, because there's a threshold set. It usually is about 60 or 70% of the voltage range. So your noise has to get above that threshold to potentially make that 1 look like, or a 0 look like a 1. So there's a little bit more inherent resistance to noise. And then the other thing, of course, is that packets can have metadata. So we could actually be transmitting information. Now, I'm not looking to replace XLR for microphones with a digital thing, but we could, if you imagine it going so far, it could go that far to where the microphone packets contain the model and serial number of the microphone. And if you're on a set and you're shooting and you have multiple microphones and one of the microphones gets damaged, and you notice in the recording, maybe after the fact, not immediately while it's happening, you could look at what device was the cause. So this was the microphone serial number 1234, and then go pull that from wherever that microphone specifically had a problem, and not have that in your normal use. Stuff like that. You can also, I mean, you can have some microphones have bad characteristics and high humidity. So you could have potentially even smarter microphones with like humidity sensor in them, which not really expensive to do, but the humidity sensor could send information back to the recorder or whatever to alert the sound recording engineer, the camera operator, whoever's looking at this stuff, that it's approaching a scenario where the recording quality or the microphone quality could become impaired or limited. Additionally, moving to a bidirectional system means that we have a way better opportunity to do things like syncing time codes and clocks. There's so much of a kludge in time codes, as far as I'm concerned, as things stand for the lower end of the system. So when you're shooting Hollywood, there's really good sync, time code generation, etc. But when you start talking about working on using mirrorless cameras or hybrid cameras or whatever, syncing accurately is, well, it's kludgy. So you could do something like use tentacle syncs. They put a audio track down that encodes the time information. But honestly, it's an audio track. It's kludgy. I mean, it works, but it's like, well, okay, what can we do? Because we don't have a better way to do this. You can sort of try to sync times on cameras, but that's, like with GPS or something, but there's enough error there in my experience that if I sync my two 5Ds to GPS, sorry about that. This is really not my day for recording this, obviously, as my camera batteries just died. So I'm going to just keep going from where I was. So syncing GPS clocks on two 5Ds sitting in the same location, and I will not have perfect synchronization in the time. It should be the case, but I never saw that whenever I tried it with my two 5Ds. So getting a time code signal that can talk between cameras over Wi-Fi or some wired network or whatever, that would be a phenomenal tool in being able to make it more easy to shoot with multiple camera angles. Now, I mean, what I do now is sync with audio waveforms, but that's even, again, a kludge. It relies on the software, your NLE, to do it properly. It relies on the uh, audio on all the cameras to be relatively good. So if you have a camera that's further away and it doesn't have a good audio signal, it may not sync just because of the audio signal. And of course, if you're far enough away for whatever reason, uh, you're going to have the delay of audio. It's going to, the time it takes the sound to propagate, that could result in an even bigger desync with the audio. So not, like that would be, fantastic to have good time synchronization on our cameras and audio recorders. The other thing, of course, is the ability potentially to transmit standardized stop and start and control signals. If you're shooting, like, there's absolutely no problem, like, functionally, for me to take my two 5Ds, put two lenses on them, grab my audio recorder, set up, and shoot two angles. It works. It's not, I get two video files and an audio file, and I can bring it into my NLE. I can sync all of that based on the audio waveform, and I can go about editing. It's still a pain because you got to start the audio recorder. You got to start the two cameras independently. You don't have any way to sort of centrally supervise what's going on. So if one of the cameras stops recording while you're shooting, you're not standing behind it, you don't know. It just stopped. What if the card was full, if the camera overheated? You have no central information about that. Where with good digital communication protocol going between cameras and audio sources, all of this stuff could be synced to a central source. So you could have a camera you set as your primary camera, and the primary camera has a little indicator that shows that the secondary camera is synced. The secondary camera is getting audio. It's getting audio from the audio recorder. And when you hit record, everything starts recording. That would be, I think, would be useful. At least it would be really useful for me in trying to shoot with multiple cameras without having a crew to help. So that's my utopian dream. I see Canon Shoe as being a tiny step in that direction, even though I think it's going to be a tiny step that's very tiny because it's going to be a Canon only thing. But it's a tiny step in the direction of getting this stuff talking to each other and linked together in a way that just makes it easier for a single person to manage. So I'm going to wrap this up there. I just don't have the patience to trying to deal with any, or take this any further. And it's starting to get close to dinner time, but that's neither here nor there. Dinner time for me, at least. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say on this kind of thought, whether you would like to see, what you think, what the thought is on Canon's hot communication shoe, what you think you'd like to see, how open you think you'd like this to be, and what do you want to start seeing products from various manufacturers for this, or do you think this is just a pointless dead end? And of course, I'd love to hear some feedback on my utopian dream for the camera industry, as a thing. So if you have some thoughts, drop them in the comments below. If you found this useful, interesting, or at least a little entertaining, please consider smashing that like button. Also, if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. The other two videos that are going up on a weekly basis right now are tips and tricks for the EOS R5, but I have a series starting in another week or two that is going to start going through everything I know about lights and lighting technologies, getting into everything, kind of all of the decisions that I've faced and looked at and processes involved of finding a good way to light videos at sort of a YouTube budget place. So if you're interested in any of that, subscribe, get notified, click the bell, do that kind of stuff. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for making it this far. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you.